So welcome to the world building class with a town planner. We put a bit of a twist on it, so I think it'll be very exciting. Just very quickly, we have quite a few new friends. So I just wanted to recap what is Deadlines for Writers and how have you found us and what have you stumbled upon? In short, Deadlines for Writers is the answer to your procrastination woes. We believe a deadline is the fastest way to fill a blank page. We apply this philosophy to poetry, short stories, and novel writing. We offer one free class per month, and today we are talking about world building and setting. It is such a big tool, so much so that it is often neglected and underutilized. It often overwhelms us even before we can begin. So with me today is a very talented urban planner, Stephan Gildenhuys, and I invited him here to talk to us about urban planning, how to build a town, and to answer the question, of course, I know everyone's dying to ask, can we really live on Mars? Stephan is also my baby cousin, so I'm very proud and happy to have him here. But I'm going to read his very impressive bio to you. He has a PhD in spatial planning and 2 decades of experience. He's a registered town and regional planner and urban designer. As director of BSc Gildenhuys and Associates, he specializes in bridging the gap between policy and implementation through evidence-based analysis and integrated design. His work across Africa focuses on aligning infrastructure with long-term growth. He applies his expertise in GIS, spatial analysis, and development economics to create more effective, inclusive and resilient places. His research on post-1994 South African planning policies supports a practical, measurable model for the global South. Now, if you haven't met me, my name is Mia and my bio is considerably shorter. I'm a creative writing coach. I've taught, coaxed, and encouraged writers for over 14 years. And most importantly, I've been a writer my whole life. Like you, I struggle with procrastination, self-doubt, and finding the time to write. I realized if I wanted to achieve my goals, I needed help. I also needed to think differently about the writing process. I started out in a formal classroom. I loved teaching face-to-face. I loved the course. It was a great curriculum, but inevitably that class would be over. We would reach the end of the sessions and the writer would be sent out into the world to fend for themselves. Very few wrote after the class. It's hard doing it on your own, and that's why I created Deadlines for Writers. I wanted to help writers beyond the theory. I wanted to help them reach their goals. I wanted to help them increase their word counts and finish their books. It's a journey. I didn't just want to set them on a path. I wanted to walk with them. I wanted to share the load. So here we are. This session is about 60 to 90 minutes long. After the class, I will invite you to join us for the free 12 short stories challenge. I will also tell you about next month's class and about our upcoming writing challenge in October. So stay tuned for an amazing practical session chock full of writing theory and advice that will help you improve your writing. So let's dive into the class. I'm very quickly going to recap the elements of setting from a fiction point of view, and then we are going to hand over to Stephan, and he's going to take us into the town planning aspects. Okay, I do see the stuff in the chat. I will take a look at that in a moment. Okay, so also don't scramble to take notes at the moment. Just listen and absorb. You will receive this image. I have a spreadsheet that I'll send out to you guys as well that you can use. You will receive all of that in the replay email. Now just listen. This is such a big topic. It really takes, it's a big thing to wrap your head around. Okay. So very briefly, elements of setting, we can divide it into, I think these are 12 categories at the moment. So we speak about physical location, the era of our story, the objects our characters surround themselves within the story, the duration of the story, the weather in your story, culture and society in your story, religion and mythology, government and politics, science, technology and magic, if you're writing fantasy, art and architecture, the legal systems, and the geography of your setting. Each one of these elements is going to be related to the plot or to your storytelling characteristics. So how do all these 12 categories relate to your genre? How do they relate to your plot? How do they relate to character, viewpoint, dialogue, pace, description, and change? So ultimately, when you're going to go through all of these things, you are going to go, how does the genre affect the physical location? How does the genre affect the era? How does the genre affect the objects? Okay. I will be sending this to you, this image, and then you'll also receive a worksheet like this that you can work through as well and then add in your own things. What you have to keep in mind is that your story is an ecosystem. It's not a checklist. And that's why I'm always hesitant with lists. But in an ecosystem, certain things carry more weight than others. A big change here affects a small element over here. A small element here results in a really big change somewhere else. And that is how I want you to think of your story as well. So when I list all 12 of those things, they are not going to be equally weighted in every single story you do. Religion may not play a very big role in your story. The weather may be very averaged and not very erratic, so then it might not influence the story as much. So just always keep that in mind when we talk about these elements. Okay. So that is where I'm going to stop. It's just to refresh you, and then I'm going to give it over to Stephan. He's going to share his screen, and then we can carry on from there. So Stephan, if you are, I haven't co-hosted you. Sorry.
No
Let me find
problem.
you. I'm always so organized. Oh, I always pretend to be so organized, and then mute more. Make co-host. Make co-host. There we go. You should be in charge of this.
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. What a turnout. Quite a few people in here, so no pressure. I'll try and do my best to convey my message as well as possible. I'm just quickly going to switch off my video so that there's no bandwidth issues, and then we can get started. Okay. So, what the workshop is briefly about, or specifically my presentation, is to introduce you to some basic planning concepts, things like history of cities, why people settle, and then dig into a few concepts that we as planners think about when we plan for cities. And hopefully, some of these aspects will inspire you and get you going in your writing, and then get you thinking about little things that might improve your setting and the places where your writing takes place. So, just briefly, what is world building? So, world building is the process of constructing an imaginary world for your story, including its geography, culture, history, and cities. Believable worlds make for more immersive stories, while on the other hand, urban planning is the real world art and science of designing towns and cities. So, it focuses on how land is used, why settlements form, and how cities grow. These concepts can be borrowed to ground your fictional cities in reality, just as real cities has reasons for being where it is and a particular layout, a fictional city should feel logical and lived in. Using urban planning fundamentals can help avoid cliches and create story opportunities. So, diving into the second section, I want to introduce you to a few urban planning basics. So, the concept of urban planning is ancient. Early cities didn't just happen, many were deliberately designed. For example, the Indus Valley city of Mohenjo-Daro, which is estimated to be about or was established about 2500 BC, had a grid layout and brick drains, showing a surprisingly advanced city design. Medieval cities often grew around castles or trade routes, sometimes with chaotic winding streets, whereas some modern cities like Brasilia or Canberra were planned from scratch on a drawing board. So people choose to settle in sites based on practical needs. Common factors often include access to water, like rivers and springs, for drinking and farming, fertile soils for crops, and a safe elevation, high grounds to avoid floods. Um, Many towns began as trading posts where roads or river meets, or a defensible location like a hill or an island. Natural resources such as minerals and timber also attract settlements. So, in short, a town usually exists for a reason. When world building, I think it's important to be clear on why here for each of the cities or settlements that you're writing about. Now, planners consider many aspects when designing or improving cities. One of the first key things is layout, so street and transportation. Medieval cities often had narrow, winding lanes versus modern grid plans. Um, a grid can signal a planned city. It's easier to navigate, whereas twisting streets might imply organic growth over centuries. And if you look at some of the examples that I show on the slide here, I think you can see the vast differences in city layouts. And maybe something also just to consider is that once a city layout has been established, these cities and the layouts stay there for centuries. If you think, for example, about the old parts of Rome, it still looks exactly the same as it did 2,000 years ago. But cities also grow and they change, and you'll often see outside of these old, more organic types of layouts, that there are more modern grid designs, and this is often a reflection of how cities change and grow and expand. Then land use is also quite an important component to things that we do. So areas for housing, markets, industrials areas, farms. In real life, this is called zoning. So a well-planned city might have a central market district, Templar Quarter, Nobles Quarters, and separate poor slums. And these divisions can add social tension to your story. Also infrastructure, so water supply, sewers and drainage, walls and fortification, public spaces such as parks and squares. Historically, cities that lack these often suffer disease or fires, um, and that's an important consideration. But I also want to emphasize that planning is a process. Planning is iterative. So when we do it in practice, we assess the environment, we set goals, we do our designs and our strategies, and we adjust as needs change. So, in story terms, imagine the life cycle of a city, founded for one reason, then evolving. Perhaps it booms in size and must expand, or it declines, and you'll find certain parts of a city to be abandoned. Now, the next couple of slides, I want to show some practical examples, some real life examples of some of these elements. So this grainy map that you can see here, unfortunately, it's the best one I was able to find of medieval London. And you can see the narrow, winding organic growth and how London got started. And interestingly enough, it was especially from this period through to the Industrial Revolution where town planning really became mainstream, especially in Europe, where these kind of conditions that you see had a lot of health and safety issues. So obviously, when planners started to get involved, or when the profession started to evolve, um, they had to start thinking about things like building setbacks from the street and how buildings are spaced from each other to ensure that if one building catches fire, the whole city doesn't burn down. Medieval London grew alongside the Thames River without a master plan, and this really led to this kind of maze of streets and notorious lack of sanitation. The next image here is Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. It was built in the late 1960s and was designed in a bird-like layout with very specific zones for government, residential, business, wide boulevards, monumental plazas, very much in contradiction to older cities. And this is what I mentioned earlier, where engineers and planners planned these cities on paper and in front of computers. Then also, I think the two examples here is Canberra in Australia and also Paris, France. And another example that I can maybe mention, I saw someone um, in the conversation here is from Washington. Washington, D.C. is another good example of this kind of radial city design. So Paris was redesigned by Baron Haussmann in the late 1800s with wide boulevards, parks, and uniform facades to modernize the city, and also, very importantly, to improve sanitation, traffic flow, and also control uprisings. While Washington, D.C. was designed in the late 1700s with grand Baroque plans of wide avenues, vistas, and symbolic monuments to reflect power, democracy, and a new national identity. So urban planning can also reflect the values of a people or a society of the day. Another important kind of town or city that you often find historically is cities that were designed for defense. So many hilltop towns, the picture here is of Carcassonne in France, had multi-layer walls and a few gates. And in the same vein, I want to maybe just mention one fictional city, and that is Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings, a city built on a mountain with 7 concentric walls. So Minas Tirith looks spectacular and was clearly planned as a fortress, but only having one main gate also made it kind of a city planner's nightmare in terms of daily logistics. So all traffic bottleneck at this one gate, something to maybe consider in your story if your city is overly fortified. Okay, moving on to the last section. So here I just want to speak a bit about maybe more the urban planning process and things that we do consider in practice. So when urban planners sit down to design a town or city, they ask a few big questions like where should people live, how will they move around, how will they get water or food or safety, how do we make it not just functional, but also beautiful and sustainable. These questions aren't just technical, they can add story depth and logic to your fictional world. So let's just look at some of these key aspects. Now, the first one is climate and geography. So planners start with the land itself. Is it a fertile valley, a windswept plateau, a desert oasis, or a coastal bay? Geography largely dictates opportunities and risks. Fertile soil encourages farming towns, rivers make trade possible, mountains protect or isolate. So climate shapes architecture and daily life to a large extent. Hot regions often use courtyards and shaded streets for cooling, while cold regions have thick walls and clustered buildings to trap heat. Um, in practice as well, we do consider a lot of aspects in terms of climate and the natural environment. We do slope assessments to see which areas are not accessible for vehicles. We look at geology. Geology has a big impact on soil. Soil has a big impact on your capability for agriculture. So these are all things that we assess and look at and try to predict in the long term to adapt our plans to be as efficient and sustainable as possible. Then the next aspect, land use. So cities need order. It needs spaces for homes, markets, religious facilities, industrial areas, government precincts, um, things like waste disposal sites. And planners decide what belongs where so that daily life flows. A wealthy society may be carefully zoned into noble estates away from noisy industrial spaces, while an unplanned settlement might mash everything together chaotically. And very often, it's not something that specifically has a dedicated slide to it in this presentation. But obviously, we have to look at things like population dynamics. So we often look at the historical trends of population growth, household dynamics, average household sizes. This has an impact on demand for future services. And we use these historic trends to also try and make predictions about the future and what people will need. We try to estimate what kind of land uses will be required, and we try to then spatially place them within a city area and to create characters or a certain urban character within certain precincts or districts within a city or town. Then something that is also a speciality on its own, housing. So where and how people live tells us about their culture and their economy. Planners think about density, so apartments versus sprawling suburbs, building types, and access to services. Housing also reveals inequality. Are the poor crammed into tenements while the elite lives in spacious villas? And how do people access work and social facilities? where these residential areas are located, how people access activities and facilities are very important in the planning process. Then the next key component is movement. Movement is really the lifeblood of any city. Planners design streets, paths, and ports or rail lines to move people and goods efficiently. Roads can signal power, a grand boulevard for parades. It can symbolize chaos or technological advancement. And I think that technology is quite an important factor in this whole process, and I'll speak a little bit about it just now. So the way people move also reflect culture. A horse-based nomadic capital looks very different from a pedestrian medieval town or a city built for cars. And to maybe give you an example about how how technology plays a role in how it shapes cities, I want to use the example of the Great Manure Crisis. Now, this refers to a real urban crisis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, where cities like London and New York were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of horse manure and urine from the massive horse population used for transportation. Uh, with a famous Times of London article in 1894 predicting streets would be buried under 9 feet of manure in 50 years. The crisis was ultimately resolved, but not by urban planners, but they tried very hard. There was a very long and extensive conference that was held where a whole bunch of urban planners got together to try and figure out how they would fix this issue. Uh, but by the advent of sorry, but so I say the crisis wasn't resolved by urban planners, but by the advent of the automobile, which gradually replaced horses as a primary mode of transport. All these issues disappeared. So you can see how different advances in technology can fix problems or reshape issues that were present uh, at that time. The next component I want to speak a little bit about is urban design. So this is more about the aesthetics of a city. So in planning terms, function matters, but so does beauty. So planners ask, what should a city feel like? Is it meant to be or with towering monuments, or to foster community with cozy plazas and green spaces? The placement of statues, fountains, parks, and boulevards is never random. It really reflects values and powers. So, in terms of urban design, planners really think about building heights, building setbacks, the widths of sidewalks, the widths of streets. This all has quite a big impact in terms of how people experience space. Um, a simple thing that you won't often think about is the placement of street elements like street line trees. The distance in terms of spacing of trees can have an effect in terms of the speed that people drive through an area with their cars. So these are all small little things that are taken into consideration when we plan our cities and towns. Then a very important component is our natural resources, our open spaces. So cities just don't just build over nature; they also depend on it. Planners must consider farmland, forests, rivers, and parks, balancing survival needs with recreation. Open space is where people breathe, play, and gather. Sometimes nature fights back in the form of floods, earthquakes, or droughts. A city's relationship to its environment is often defined by this character. And in one of the projects I'm completing now by the end of September, a good example of that is where there's been quite a lot of conflict between nature and development and also mining activity. So where there's quite a bit of pressure on certain urban areas to expand, but obviously it's also important to ensure that certain areas are protected and conserved. And there's also this conflict in this specific area between mining. And there's this kind of cost benefit analysis that needs to take place about job creation, which is good for a very struggling economy in that specific area, um, versus the jobs and money that the mining can bring in. So these are all things that needs to be thought about and balanced. Then, just lastly, a very, very important component in city planning is infrastructure. So, behind the scenes, cities need these systems: water supply, sewer, power, schools, hospital. These are often invisible until they fail. And then they drive quite a lot of drama. So, planners think about how to deliver these essential services, who, how, and to what extent do people get access. Can a city afford it is very important. And then in most cases, infrastructure also is quite a key driver for future growth. Um, so in the end, why does this all matter? When you imagine your city, think like a planner. Every choice about land, housing, transport, beauty, nature, and services tells readers about the world's values, technology, and conflicts. A city that ignores planning might be chaotic and dangerous, but either way, the bones of the city can become the bones of your story. Samia and everyone, thank you very much. That's it from me. I'll hand over to Mia again.
Thank you, Stefan. I mean, I saw that this morning and I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And it's just, you've reinforced that again. It's really, really amazing. So many things to think about and get done, which is really, really cool. I think I'm going to open it up for questions very, very quickly. And then we're going to answer a few questions, but I do have a rather big writing exercise that I do want us to do where we're going to take all of these things and we're going to very, very quickly and just write down as many things as we can and then write a little mini scene at the end, which is like what I'd like to end with. So let us go and I just want to double check. Lita had an interesting observation in the chat, Stefan. I just quickly want to find that again. Lita asked, can planning or city planning be political?
Sorry, I just need to unmute myself. Absolutely. um, I'm going to speak a little bit about my own experience in South Africa. So, urban planning has been used as a tool to implement the ideologies of a certain period. It's definitely a political tool that's used often around the world. I think if you think back to pre 1994 South Africa, certain urban areas like our township areas had very specific layouts. I mentioned it in the presentation as well. It was a way to control riots. It was a way to suppress people in a certain way. It was a way to also keep people out of certain areas. So it definitely has a political connotation to it, and you see it today as well. I think all over the world, certain narratives or ideologies can be implemented through urban planning because that's really where it hits the ground physically.
Cool. Um, are there any other questions? If you have a question, please raise your hand and then we can get going and answer more questions. Sorry, I'm just double checking the chat that I haven't missed anyone's question. Does anyone have a question for us? Anything? Oh, someone's typing. Dum, dum, dum. Sorry, Marielle, how about upkeep as in maintenance of the city? Is that what you're referring to? Yes. Okay, Stefan, do you maybe want to speak a little bit about maintenance of cities and how would that be affected by planners and how do planners take that into account?
Absolutely. So one of the key things that we do and our practice specifically is we do what's called infrastructure investment planning. So in that instance, we look at the future needs based on population growth, and we actually calculate the future capital requirements in terms of investment for infrastructure, what type of infrastructure is required. We look at the impact on the operating budgets of municipalities that look after infrastructure. Um, we look at the ability of institutions to keep up with the requirements of infrastructure, as well as the backlogs and asset renewals. So obviously, infrastructure has a certain lifespan. A tap can be 20 years, while a major dam is 250 years. And all these things are taken into consideration when we do our planning and what the financial impacts of that are as well. Um, but that's just kind of the infrastructure component. But obviously, the infrastructure feeds the development and what's happening above ground as well. So if infrastructure isn't maintained, the chances of future expansion and development is really very low. This is also where a lot of state institutions run into financial troubles. So that's, well, very practical, but very important in the kind of work that we do. There's in terms of maintenance, I think some of the older cities, there are things like city improvement districts, and this is more the aesthetic kind of thing. So how streets are cleaned, how refuse is removed, ensuring that buildings have a new coat of paint when it's required. This is where different businesses in an area come together, and they pool their resources and money together to ensure that certain areas are maintained and well kept. Very often, if a city council can't um, take care of those elements, they will look after that, also in terms of safety and those kind of things.
Cool. Thank you, Stefan. Ro, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about water and sewage. I'm working on a novel right now, and I've been trying to figure out how to think about um, separating water supply, like drinking water and like cooking water from wastewater. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'll do my best. I'm not an engineer, but what I can tell you is that those are definitely separate systems. So your water system um, usually has, well, it's got the water source, it's got water purification plants, and then it's reticulated to the different areas in the city. So that's the water that comes from your tap, while your sewage is taken from your home. Uh, it goes to purification plants, and there is instances where and systems that are so efficient that sewage can be cleaned to a state where it is reintroduced into the water supply for drinking purposes. So there are some engineers that are quite smart, and the technology is used to actually do that. Um, but yeah, like I said, more than that, I don't have too much insights on the technical systems and how they work.
Okay,
It's
thank you, thank you.
cool. Thanks, Roy. I think it's definitely interesting where you can say that there are some people who say you can use the same water, because what I loved what Stefan said in the presentation was, when he spoke about infrastructure, he said these are the systems no one notices until they fail. So remember, in fiction, we want conflict as much as possible. And your primary source of conflict is always your antagonist. Okay, they're the biggest system that your character's fighting. They're the biggest character in the story that we go up against. But setting is, because it's such a large component of fiction, is your second source of conflict. So we're talking about planning these perfect cities and making them functional and great. But when a city fails is when you have really, really great conflict. Or when a city is chaotic and organic, that adds to really, really great conflict. The same goes again for this overly planned perfect city where it's policed and it's almost institutionalized to be able to live there. So you can really play with things like setting to add conflict to that. Um, Sarah, do you want to ask your question? I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Forgive me if I'm not.
It's Sarah.
Sarah,
Thanks. I'm wondering how city planners take into account the fact that they may plan their city for one situation, but then the financial situation or the politics of a city can change in a very short time, and how does that affect how you plan?
Sarah, that's a very good question. It's one I think planners are still grappling with. It's very easy to plan in times of growth and prosperity. To expand is easy. It's in times of downturn and contraction, which is very, very difficult. So I think in a lot of instances, it's repurposing certain areas within a city for different activities. I think a good example might be Detroit in the US, which still trying to recover after the economy that was based on the automotive industry kind of collapsed. Um, they about, I think it's about 10 or 15 years ago, they did a new city plan, and their whole focus was around community agriculture. So they tried to repurpose a lot of the vacant spaces within the city. They tried to repurpose a lot of the industrial buildings into housing, which is often quite difficult. Just because buildings are designed for specific users. Um, so there are ways of trying to do it. I think also mining towns, what they call frontier towns, are another good example where the lifespan of a mine is usually between, let's say, 15 to 25 years with a booming economy, and people move there in search of opportunities. And then when the life of mine is finished, there's no more work, and very often these towns go to waste. So it is a difficult situation. I don't think anyone has a clear answer to it, but there has been some good initiatives to try and repurpose specific areas. The economy obviously plays a huge part in this, and very often not just the local economy. Things like mineral resources are dominated by international commodity prices. So what happens on the other side of the world can have a massive impact on your town or city. So there's also, I think, quite a few good examples. I can't remember the town in Germany now, where a lot of these very what they call high intensity industrial areas, manufacturing spaces, got repurposed into mixed use developments where they introduced residential precincts and new parks. There's quite a few examples of uh, uh, um, like rubbish dumps that were converted into parks or golf courses. So there are some, I think, good case studies to be found on how to repurpose old or derelict areas.
Thank you so much.
thank you. And Mocha, you had your hand up, and now you've taken it down. Do you still want to ask your question, or shall I dive into that? Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I'll ask it if that's okay.
cool.
I am wondering if there are any cities, obviously there are, that have grown up into the sky rather than out. I know there's a couple out there like Edinburgh, but I really want to take it to an extreme level. And I'm wondering what Stephan's thoughts are about this, and if there are any tips that I should look out for.
Good question. One of my kind of key focus areas in my research is also about urban density. Um, I think probably the most well-known example is probably a city like New York or London. Um, but maybe to take it a step back, to explain why cities grow up, why they grow vertically. Um, it's it's um, it's called the bid rent theory. And the basics of that is just to say that obviously your central business districts are often your most accessible districts, and this is the easiest place for people to get into. Traditionally, not so much today. It's become quite congested in these kind of cities. So the value of the land is much higher than it would be on the periphery or outskirts of the city, and that's very often why you find higher buildings in your most accessible central areas. And as you move outwards, they often taper out. So there's actual um, economic theory about the density and intensity of development, and where the optimal location is for these different land uses to find their place. That's also why you most likely have um, your kind of single family residential environments, um, quite a stretch away from your central business districts, and also why apartments in some of these cities are so expensive. It's a supply and demand issue. Um, so yeah, there's very definite reasons why cities grow up. Um, the the extent of how high they can go, I think that's probably down to geology and engineering in terms of what they can actually put on the ground, and how much money the cities or developers have to actually construct these tall buildings. There was another point I wanted to make, but it's slipping my mind now. But a very interesting question.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. There's still quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to try and find ones that kind of cover the most base, and then we can see how far we can go from there. So the next one is Simon has asked, if you're building something from scratch and want it to be realistic, how do you balance ideal planning, e.g., and planned community with organic development, as evidenced in older cities that have grown over time and changed with new technology? No pressure.
Difficult question. Nah, good question. Good question. So when it comes to new towns, when you have what the technical term for that is greenfields development, it is a lot easier. Um, I'm thinking specifically now, and if you can maybe Google this. There is a movement called New Urbanism. It originated in the US, and the whole idea was to create more walkable, more sustainable, more accessible new towns. Um, in essence, what they tried to do is to replicate old European cities that were walkable, but it the movement has also come under quite a bit of criticism, um, because it is a once-off development that's done, while European towns that grew over centuries and have this kind of organic growth to it has got a lot more character, and it feels a lot more lived in, where the kind of new urbanism movement is criticized for creating almost, let's say, fake towns, if I can use that term. Um, so I think also new towns, it depends on what the developers want to do, what the need is. Um, I don't think there's often quite a lot of new towns where you would find tall buildings. It's usually more residential kind of developments, with a few key local shopping areas, or a high street or main street. I think probably the best example of like a new development at scale is a place like Dubai, um, where they just poured in a lot of money to develop what they see as almost the ultimate city. But even if you've been privileged enough to be to buy a, I've got quite a few issues with it. I mean, it's spectacular, but accessibility in the highway systems are quite weird. And it in some areas it does feel quite cold, and then that's where organic city that's grown over centuries, I think, does have a lot more character and a lot more just feel to it, and you kind of feel the history and the spaces that you are moving through.
Cool. John has given us a thumbs up. Cool stuff. I think, yeah, is there anyone else who wants to ask their question? Because then I think we're going to start writing and I'm going to set Stephan free. I know he still has a day job that he has to get to tomorrow. So does anyone have, if we can take maybe one last question? Diana, your question?
Yeah, thinking about what if something doesn't work and is going to create an issue for our characters in our stories, what's maybe the top 2 or 3 things that can go wrong in a city? Infrastructure, you were mentioning, so I'm assuming that's like transportation and stuff like that, but what other kinds of things?
Yeah, I think obviously infrastructure is a major one. If one of those big systems collapse, that can have a dire effect on people. If you're not able to get rid of waste, if you don't have electricity, if you're not able to make a phone call, that's probably the biggest one. And I think you often see it in quite a lot of movies and books as well. Economic collapse is quite a big one. I mentioned that earlier. I'm trying to think of another one now. I think economic collapse and infrastructure collapse is probably the two biggest ones that has the biggest overall impact. There might be some processes that changes very slowly over time that might not be a direct or specific event. Trying to think now.
Something like climate change or like major, like war or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, war is a big one. I mean, climate change is something that happens quite slowly. But I think the climate change one in terms of city planning comes back to my comment in my presentation about technology. So there's quite a lot of I want to say rules and policies in place at this stage in terms of the building materials that people should use, especially in large cities. You see different types of materials. You see quite a lot of guidance in terms of the type of glass for windows, things like that. So buildings and cities are definitely becoming a lot more energy efficient and a lot smarter. But it is very important to know that to be able to change these things are very expensive. So to repurpose old buildings is a problem. To build new ones is a lot more effective and a lot cheaper as well. But I do think technology does have a role to play in mitigating some of these effects.
Thanks so much.
Okay, dear friends, this is fascinating, and I think we can listen to Stephan talk all night, but you are still here to write. So, Stephan, yeah, I'm going to set you free. You're welcome to run off. You're welcome to stay, of course, if you really want to, but I do know it's late in your world. So you are welcome to go and chill if you want to, but we are going to do a writing exercise now. It's a bit of a longer exercise. So, because we're just going to build a few things. I don't give you a lot of time to do it because there's quite a bit of writing that I want us to do. And then I want you to not think too much, okay? Just kind of go with it. There's no way we can do all of this as quickly or in like encompassing everything that there is. It's such a big topic. Okay. So, there are basically three scenarios that we're going to look at. It is a past scenario, a present scenario, and a future scenario. So in your past scenario, you can write a story about magic peasants who are fleeing an evil magic-hating king. In a present day story, you can pretend to be a land developer who wants to go and develop a piece of land in a sensitive natural area. And futuristic, pretend it is a dystopian story and the world has ended and you have to recreate a settlement. Okay, those are three options. If you have a scenario in your book already, please, you can use that as well. You're completely welcome to. But in writing, we often refer to the 5 W's and the 1 H. It's a journalistic principle or a tool that we use as journalists. And when I tried to find a way how to take all of these things and to simplify it, these were some of the first questions that came up. Okay, so let's take a look. I want you to answer first the 5 W's. So first of all, decide if you're telling the past story, present story, or future story. And then you're going to answer the 5 W's. The 5 W's, who is going to live there? Where are they going to live? Why are they going to live there? What is it that they have to build or create? Or what is it that they're going to do there if you have to? And then why there specifically? Okay, so just answer those questions first. I'm going to give you a past, present, future. That's the first you have to decide. Okay, if you answered those 5, we are now going to look at the H. So I've also popped that in the chat. And these was the present prompt was you're a land developer who wants to create a property development in a naturally sensitive area. In a world where everyone is magical, yet the king hates magic. Yes, that's the past prompt. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to look at the how. Now, the things Stephan mentioned in his presentation were climate and geography, land use, housing, transport, urban design, natural environment, and infrastructure. So just very quickly go look at this little world or place that you've created and see if you can just write down what is the basic climate and geography, what is the land going to be used for, what kind of transport do you have in your story. What I really liked about urban design, which Stephan mentioned, is how do you want your city to feel? And when we try to convey tone in our stories, setting plays a huge part in that. If it's a rom-com, New York City is bright and lovely and airy. If it is a crime novel and we're running away from a serial killer, New York City takes on a dark, ominous feeling. Okay, so think about what you want your city to feel like. Okay, so these things I have popped in the chat, I'm going to mention them again. Climate and geography, land use, housing, transport, urban design, natural environment, and infrastructure. Okay, were you able to just jot down something under a few of those bullet points are entirely fine? Because now I want you to go, and I'm going to set a timer for this. You have 7 minutes. Don't overthink it. I'm not expecting a literary masterpiece. If it happens, great. But just put pen to paper. And now I want you to take that who character that you created. And I'm hoping it's a person, well, if it's not a person, that it's not a big group, but try and make it an individual character and set them out into this world that you have created. An easy one to do is to send them to the market. Okay, they need to find food in some way. So your peasants are very, very hungry. They have to find a way to feed themselves. Do they forage in the forest? Do they go to a mass market and risk being captured? Your land developer has to figure out how he is going to, this is such a remote location. How is he going to get his building supplies there? How is he going to find ways to feed his building crew? All of those things, these are the challenges that he's going to come up with. And can he send them into the forest to forage for themselves as well? Or your futuristic dystopian world is, if this world has been destroyed by nuclear blast, how can they procure food? Do they have to rummage through old supermarkets and find canned goods? Or is the world in such a state that they can plant? So just set your character out into the world and try and showcase these elements. The chances of using all of them are going to be very, very slim, and I don't want your story to read like a checklist. But put your character into the world, put them onto the page, and let us experience a little bit of your world. I'm giving you 7 minutes. Don't overthink it. Just have fun. Okay, writers, finish up your last sentence for me. 7 minutes have gone by. I think we're going to look at about 3 or 4 examples. So if you do want to share your piece, please raise your hand, and then we will go through what we can. So while everyone is just getting that sorted, I quickly want to tell you about next month or what's coming up. We have got a September class that's coming up, is the How to Plot, a guide for pansters. I literally call it plotting for pansters. So if you've ever tried plotting and it hasn't worked for you, and you love pansting, but it gets you into so much trouble, and you would like to have a balance between the two without having to be too rigid, this is the class for you. If you do enjoy plotting, this is your time to shine. You're going to have a ball. But this is just a very simple process of approaching your story. What we'll also do in this class is tell you about the 30 days of plotting challenge, which happens. So the class is a precursor to that. The 30 days of plotting challenge happens from 1 to 30 October. It is every day you will be given a plotting exercise or a prompt to free write, and then you can actually write scenes from your book. You can write character biographies, and at the end of the 30 days, you will have a very nice outline for your book without having to be too rigid about it. The early bird discount does expire on the 1st of September. So if you do want to join us for it, those are the 2 things to look out for in the site, but I will include these links as well in the replay email, and you can read more about it and find out everything that you want to for the challenge. It is a really good way to kickstart your book or to whip your messy first draft into shape. Okay, so let's see who wants to share their little scene. You're under no obligation, but it'll be really, really fun. Making rolls, making the roads tall sets a cascade in motion leading to such a cool. Who wants to share their piece? Anyone? Good. Anne is going to be brave. Anne, do you want to read? Anne and then Nathan. Awesome. You just have to remember to unmute, Anne. I don't know if you are talking or if you're fighting to find the button. It's the world's smallest button. Let's hear it.
Okay, so I had lots of brothers interrupt me. This might be terrible.
Nope.
Okay. The nobles could have built their houses closer together, but that would have been too convenient. At least it forced them to spend more of their wealth on transport, letting some people shove the first gold they'd had since Silor knew when. Archik shook his head, rolling up the blueprint and looking over the massive... Can't read my handwriting. Resource pile they dragged to the middle of the city after Lady Hathrit's disaster of wanting 3 different kinds of support beams in fewer days. Even the sharpest of accountants couldn't anticipate costs like that. Not to mention the rain. Archie could hear it pattering on the cloth overhead. Transport was hard enough with the constant mud, but all this stone had to go to gargoyles. He couldn't believe they were desecrating the best timber in the world for the nobles, that the nobles were desecrating the best timber in the world for their little competition. Whoever let these idiots stay in charge ought to be hanged, he thought. That's it.
That's it. Okay. That's pretty impressive for 7 minutes. Well done. Okay, so you have a fictional city that you've created, and it's to the benefit of the people who are in transportation. And what was the competition? I think I missed that part.
Oh, possibly because that was just kind of an idea that I had. The idea is that the noblemen all want to build the grandest mansions, and so they're all like doing it too far apart because they all want large grounds, which makes it really difficult for all people building them.
Great. Okay. Very, very nice. Awesome conflict, and this inconsiderate people and the people who have to try and get stuff done. So that's really, really cool. Well done. Okay. That was a very refined idea for such a short time. That's fantastic. Well done. Nathan, let's hear what, I'm not sure what you want to do. Do you just want to unmute, or what are you going to try?
Unmuted.
Oh, there we go. Hi. Yeah, let's hear it.
I've written mine more like a synopsis. I'll share my screen.
Nathan, I don't think you can share a screen. Only a host can share their screen.
All right. I'll read this then.
Great, thank you.
I just based it on the criteria you gave me. An
Cool.
ancient race lived there in the past that is coming to bear in the present on a small volcano in a fictional place with no name. In a timeline run by an energy portal swinging between the 18th century to the present and into the unknown, because the writer is writing the story with inspirational help from his real-time base somewhere on the south coast of England. The climate is variable according to time shift from temperate to jungle conditions. The land is generally rocky and the people live in camps and even a lighthouse, moving by foot and even on a sailing ship. The civilization is very disrupted by forces unknown. They eat and drink as and when they can, working as a team to get resources from their immediate environment, with the writer working alone in the background, creating a world he is unaware of so far.
That was very nice, Nathan. It reminded me
Very
of what
fictional.
No, it's lovely. That Emma Thompson movie, I think, is Stranger Than Fiction, where as she's writing the story, the characters move across the page. It kind of gave me that idea. The writer is busy and this time portal is swinging. Very, very nice piece. Well done.
I'm just writing it from genres that I've read and enjoyed myself.
That's
So
where
just
we
letting it flow.
That's great. I think it was really, really cool. Well done. Let's see. John, do you want to share yours?
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't get to
Yes.
work in the actual, you know, it's a past story with the pigeons. I didn't get to work in the fact that the pigeons are actually magical and that they're a healing instead of whatever. But this is set in the American Civil War period. Jesse ran up the stairs to the roost and yelled at Abraham, "They're coming down the street." Abraham saw the blue coats marching in a small squad, checking rooftops for lofts. The Union Army has been desperate to improve communications and hit upon carrier pigeons as a secondary source. Less likely to shoot a plump bird from the sky as opposed to cutting a telegraph wire or derailing a train. They both froze as they were spotted, and a trio of soldiers forced their way up into the tenement house. Brooklyn locksmiths must be paid by the government to let people in, not keep people out, Abraham thought, as he and Jesse put their backup plan into action. Their roost has a false floor, and they quickly placed their precious birds into place. Can't read my own handwriting here. Into their places, into their temporary holding cells. Once the birds are fully, once the birds are in the dark, they're quiet, and they tend to fall asleep quickly. Their roosts pivot down against the wall, and all the straw that falls to the floor gets quickly covered up in a carpet of loose blankets. A bedroll is always handy near the corner, and Jesse goes into his predestined place. He starts to shiver, and then at the sight of Jesse shivering, the soldiers turn on their heels and find their way back down the stairs. They weren't looking for typhoid.
Wow. That's a very nice twist. I love the magical pigeons. I love having to hide them. I think it's really, really nice. It adds an interesting twist to the story. So I think that was very, very nice. You created a very nice atmosphere in that pigeon coop and everything. So very well done. That was very cool. Let's hear from Mike.
All right. As opposed to taking one of your scenarios, I did something related to a current work. And I'll just say it takes place in sort of an ultra modern urban environment that's probably a little bit too perfect. The open market offered a dictionary definition of choice and cleanliness. Stalls of an identical shade of white lined an easy to navigate grid of paved pathways, each wide enough for 3 people to pass with appropriate social distance between them. Sarah wandered the market with her recycled fabric bag over her shoulder, her eyes bouncing from the bright blue skies above to the lush green trees placed at perfectly random intervals between the stalls, to the rainbow colored variety of locally farmed vegetables and prepared foods in every stall she passed. The sights and smells inflamed her hunger, which only made it more difficult to choose. She almost forgot why she was here. Was it for a lunch of sampled treats, produce to cook for dinner on her first night unburdened by lab work, or both? She decided on both, but prioritized addressing her hunger. That's it.
Very nice. It was a very vivid scene that you created. I really, really like this market. I love the idea of the social distancing. It makes me imagine, is it because of disease or illness like we had with COVID, or is it just the nature of the society, the culture that demands a certain amount of distance between people? Very nice thing that you're layering in there that you can really start playing with. So I think that was very cool. Well done. Okay.
Thanks for the opportunity to share.
No, it was lovely. Well done. Cool stuff, friends. I think, yeah, if that's what we have here, I see Sean popped his in the chat. So I'm quickly going to read Sean's, and I think that's going to be the last one, and then we can all go off into the rest of our Thursdays. So I see Stephan featured in this one. So Stephan blinked his eyes open and groaned. His back hurt. The dirt floor in the tent did nothing to help his aging back. He wipes his face, hands coming away brown with dust and grime. Is nothing clean in this damn town? He wondered. It takes him a few seconds, but he gets to his feet, bones and joints cracking in protest. He brushes off his undercoat and adds another layer before leaving the tent. The dust hits him hard. His mood lowers, but he has a job to do. He's one of the few that can hunt, and the children are hungry. After a few morning routines, he gathered his hunting gear and walked away from the new city. Muttered to himself. Ain't nothing new about this city, he muttered. He briefly noticed the groups of children as he left the feeble city gates, and the new city disappeared behind him. Sure, it's close to the water, and some of the ground is okay, but it's still dying, he thought to himself. But he still had to do his part, at least until he moved on. Very nice. Okay, so I love this idea of this new city that's actually quite grimy and seemingly inhospitable. I think there was dust in my eyes because suddenly I couldn't read anything. But that was so apologies for stuttering through your piece, Sean, but I do think it's lovely. You created a very nice atmosphere there, and the dirty tent and the grime and everything was really, really nice. So in terms of atmosphere and tone, I think you got what you were aiming for there. And then, I mean, what is he going to hunt? How do you cook in this atmosphere, or in this environment with all this dust around and everything? It just feels like you're going to be chewing dirt with every bite you take. I really like that. Well done. Okay, very, very good. Cool stuff, friends. Are there any more questions? Anything else you're wondering about? The replay will be with you. It's quite late now, and then it has to download and upload and upload and download again. But it should be with you sometimes during the course of tomorrow. And then you are welcome to take your time, go through the presentation, play with the questions again and everything. I know it's fascinating listening to them speak. Like when we're talking about building the cities up, I never even considered what the ground must be like to carry the weight of the city going up. So I do think it's very, very interesting and some nice things to go think of. I know I'm going to be pulling my setting apart to see what I can do with it again. So, okay. It's a pleasure, Sean. Any other more questions before we sign off? Thank you for joining me. If it was your first time, I hope you come back. If it was your second, third, 40th, and 5th time, I hope you come back as well. And then, of course, I'll include some links about the 12 Short Stories Challenge as well. And then, of course, the information about the next classes and everything. We try and do a class a month, so it's really nice. Always a different topic, always something like this. Okay. But thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope you have an awesome Thursday. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.